Okay, well next we're going to have Paul talking about running a state office. So Paul Mitchell.
Thanks, Marsha. Well, I was handed my agenda for today. It's all very neatly typed out here, and the lines, and my eyes just fell, as anyone naturally does, on my own name, and right under it is the words running for state office, and all I saw was Paul Mitchell running for state office. No, I'm not. But I did. As most of you, I think, know, I ran for state representative in the 62nd district, and it included this area: Gurnee, Lake Villa, Grace Lake, Hingsville, Round Lake Beach, and on into Ingleside. I ran in the primary against a Republican incumbent who I was not happy being represented by in Springfield, and I had a very interesting and positive experience. I have 10 minutes, and I had a whole speech written. This goes 4 or 5 pages at 14-point font, and I timed it out perfectly at 9 minutes, and then I started thinking about what I really wanted to say, and so now I have a page of notes. So if I go over, Marsha's got a 12 over here, I think. Before I get started, I do have 2 points to make. First, it's always a great pleasure to be in a Northern Illinois Patriots meeting. And there's 2 reasons for that. First, for me, I go to a lot of meetings. I go to Republican Assembly of Lake County, RLC. I go to coalition meetings. I go to Lake County Right to Life meetings. I go to a lot of meetings over the course of a month. These are the best meetings I go to. First, because of the organization of the meeting. We have a multimedia presentation. We know who's speaking. We know what they're supposed to be talking about. And second, because I don't see the same faces here. At all those other meetings, frequently 90% of the people are the same people I see at all the other meetings. And it's just a handful of people that change. Here, the vast majority are people that I don't see at anything else. And it's just a delight to get to a different crowd, to not be constantly talking to the same echo chamber. The second thing I wanted to say is I just had a call from Helene Walsh a minute ago. And Joe Walsh wanted to say hello. He wanted to come here in person and say hello. And he was really sorry. He had like 6 places he wanted to go. You know, Joey's always going in 3 different directions. And he wanted to be here. He got stuck somewhere else, but Helene asked me to pass on from Joe his greetings and his thanks to the Northern Illinois Patriots. Right now, Joe is hovering around 550 vote lead over Melissa Bean. That's less than half a percentage point. Bean is not conceding. She's waiting for the absentee ballots and the provisional ballots to be counted. So somehow she thinks the military vote is going to pull her out. Rather than go into the whole sordid tale of my autobiographical story of having run for state office, I want to address a couple of questions. Why would anyone run for state office? When I say state office, I'm not talking about comptroller. I'm not talking about attorney general, things that are statewide. I'm talking about state representative, state senate. Those are relatively small areas in most cases. In answer to that question, I want to talk a little bit about what the state legislature is going to be doing in the next weeks and months. So coming up within the next few days, by the end of next week, they're going to have started what's called the veto session. That means everybody who's currently in the legislature, whether they got voted out this week or not, that the new term doesn't start till January. So all the current guys are still going to go back in. Now, this was much more scandalous when we thought we were going to win the House of Representatives, win the General Assembly, which we didn't do. But they're going to be voting on a new budget for the state. Well, Governor Quinn has the entire 2 years now been demanding a tax increase. He wants to increase our state income tax, which is a flat tax. Everybody in the state of Illinois who makes an income pays the same amount, and it's 3%. He wants to raise it to 5%. That's a 2/3 increase. They're going to vote on that before Christmas. The other big thing they're going to debate and vote on is civil unions. Same-sex civil unions. They want to give the rights of married couples to same-sex couples. That's expensive. First, it's just expensive and nobody knows how expensive it is. Nobody's even begun to look at it. And second, a lot of people like the idea of people who would not accept gay marriage, like the idea of same-sex civil unions because they think it's a compromise position. And it isn't. Same-sex civil unions is a milestone. It's just an intermediate goal for the other side to say, okay, we got this far, now we're going to go this much farther. The problem is, the other side gets to define what marriage is. We know that marriage is about children. That's the only interest that the state has in marriage. That's the only reason the state has for regulating or licensing or encouraging marriage, is because through marriage, that's where we get the next generation of tax-paying citizens. And marriage is the single best way, a simple, stable, married couple is the best way to engender and raise the next generation of citizens. That's the sole interest that the state has in marriage. And there's no benefit from the state to two men or two women doing whatever it is they do in private, in a sterile relationship. So they're going to vote on that before Christmas, on giving benefits, state benefits, to same-sex couples and calling it civil unions. Now, so one last thing on this. In California, you remember last year, they went through this huge thing where they had a big election on something called Proposition 8. Proposition 8 was an amendment to their state constitution that restricted to marriage to heterosexual couples. Proposition 8 became necessary because their state Supreme Court found that their constitution required that equal rights had to include equal marriage rights for same-sex couples. The court in that case specifically found that civil unions, which they had in California, wasn't a sufficient measure. So if we have same-sex civil unions, we are one short court decision away from gay marriage. They don't even have to debate it in the legislature. So we need to be in touch with our state legislators and make sure they're voting against this. Yes, ma'am?
I talked to Joanne Osmond's office about that today. She's against that.
Yes, she is. Unfortunately, Susie Schmidt isn't so adamant against it. Sandy Cole, whom I ran against, has had a very consistent position, and it's like this. Her fingers in the wind. She says outright, and she has consistently said this outright all year, that she will not vote for same-sex civil unions as long as her constituents don't want her to. There's no principle there. There's nothing other than, well, who's the loudest voice? So we will need to be the loudest voice when this comes up. Yes, ma'am?
But isn't that her job?
You think?
Well, no.
I think.
Deal with her constituents, regardless of what her own feelings are.
I disagree. I believe that a legislator should bring their own moral understanding to their votes, because we delegate to them to decide on all these issues. Jim?
That's only if they have a moral code.
That's right. The problem is, in Illinois, we've elected too many people, too many legislators who cannot make fine moral distinctions. And look how that's worked out for us. So, sir.
You want to answer your question? Just view the Gay Pride Parade that they have every year in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
That should answer all your questions.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Is that what we want to be morally normal? So that's the veto session. Then the new year will come. There will be inaugurations, new swearings in. There'll be a new session. There will be new environmental regulations in our new Democrat legislature. There will be new business regulations. There will be new business taxes. Does anybody remember the gross receipts tax proposal that Governor Blagojevich came up with a couple of years ago? It would not surprise me to see this come back to life. That was a tax, I don't even remember what the percentage was, but it was off the top for every single business in the state of Illinois. Not gross receipts, not a tax on your profits, a tax on your gross revenues. Think about that. You're selling lemonade, and you put a certain amount of money in for the lemons, and a certain amount of money in for the sugar, and a certain amount of money in for the cups, and you sell the first one, You haven't made a profit yet, but you already owe tax on it. That is an anti-business law. And when it came up for a vote, it failed 117-0 with one abstention. But even having the governors propose something like that creates a hostile environment for business in Illinois. Yes, in the back.
How fast does that get you to a VAT tax?
Oh, well, I don't know how fast it gets to a VAT tax, but it easily could become one.
Seems like it's the same thing.
Another thing that's almost certain to come up in the spring, probably in March, is another run at what they call the Reproductive Health and Access Act. We pro-lifers refer to that as the Illinois FOCA bill. This bill would abolish all restrictions on abortion in the state of Illinois. Can you show me that red card? Do you want me to keep going?
Yes.
No, it's just coming. Rules of order called that an appeal from the chair. All right.
2 minutes, Paul.
All right, Tony's asking for 2 minutes. That's going to be hard. I'll talk fast. This bill would abolish all restrictions on abortion in the state of Illinois, including restrictions on late-term abortion. It would provide for increased state funding of abortion. It would provide for sex education beginning in kindergarten. All right. Another thing they're going to be talking about in the coming year, and this is huge, please give me 3 minutes, Tony, is redistricting. They're going to redraw all the districts. All right, now I just went through an election with Dan Shagru. I spent most of the general working on Dan Shagru's campaign, and he had a very tough district to try to win. He got 48%, I think, in the final analysis. He raised himself up from 38 to 48 from one election to the next. And that's a tough district. That was drawn specifically for Kathy Rigg, who grew up in Buffalo Grove, was a trustee in Vernon Hills, and then they tried to put a little bit of conservative Green Oaks in there to break up conservative areas. They're going to be doing that all over the state. Look at some of the state representative and congressional districts and see how these are gerrymandered. They look exactly like snakes, like a plate of spaghetti in some cases. They do this in order to maximize the ability of their party to be elected. This is legislators choosing their constituents rather than constituents choosing their own legislators.
His name was actually Gary Mander.
Well, it was Elbridge Gerry was named after. Gerry. If he pronounced it Gary, I couldn't swear to it that I'm...
That's what Savage said.
Okay. Well, Michael Savage says it. All right. Yeah, he was a vice president under two presidents, I want to say.
All these glorious things each state official comes up with, you've got to get the consensus of the rest of the legislators.
Right, but it's a one-party legislature now. So they're going to draw this map with the intention that they will be able to elect Democratic legislators, or at least Democratic majority legislators, for the next 10 years until the next census and the next redistricting. We are going to have to do whatever we can to put pressure on those people. We're going to be like the French resistance in World War II. Now, I spoke to Adam Andrzejewski this afternoon. I don't know if anybody knows Adam Andrzejewski. He ran for governor. Yeah, okay. I think he's a great guy. Adam has been making plans for what to do after the election. And he was telling me a little bit about it this afternoon. I do not have time, and I'm not familiar enough with the plans, but he asked me to get a meeting together to where he would come up and tell us all about his plans and get us involved with them. And I don't have a venue yet because he just asked me this afternoon, but it's going to happen at 7 p.m. on the 17th of this month. That's 2 weeks from yesterday. That's Wednesday of 2 weeks from now. And we will let you know what the venue is. Adam Andrzejewski will be here to tell us about his plans and his organization that we're going to have to be, like Janelle was saying, we're going to have to be the troops that are fighting this nonsense, even though we're in a minority in the legislature. I have one concluding remark to make. Most of us who got into politics recently did so because we realized that the people who've been involved all along were running away with the store while we were engaged in other things, living our lives and not paying attention. So we got involved. We educated ourselves. We've begun to educate our neighbors. We took action, and we have made a difference. But never again, as long as we live, can we ever allow ourselves the luxury of going back to our lives and not paying attention anymore.
You're right.
We said all along that Election Day would be a major battle, but that the war would continue. This battle has been a qualified victory. And as we expected, the war continues. Thanks very much for your time. Thanks.